Okay then, good afternoon and welcome to this webinar on smart routing in reality. We will take some examples and give some best practices and things to think about for you, and also the possibility for you to ask questions later on. First, just a few words, 1 minute on Telia, where we come from and where we work. Telia is the new generation telco and is a result of the merger of Telia and Sonera back in 2002. And we have operations in all Nordic and Baltic countries. Our head office is in Stockholm, and I'm right now situated in Uppsala, actually, a little bit north of Stockholm. It's quite dark, but not so cold here right now. And within Telia, we are just below 21,000 employees, so quite a large company. In our portfolio, we have a contact center as a service called Telia i-CEM, with close to 80,000 users currently and handling 350 million annual interactions in our systems. And our footprint is, as you see on the map, mainly in the Nordics, but we are also rolling out solutions now more and more in the rest of Europe. But this seminar is not going to be about Telia i-CEM, but rather about routing of contacts. And what is that? Well, it's a simple definition. We define this as the simple art of handling contacts, sending them to the right destination in the right time, and to a person or destination with the right skills. Because contact center, it's not a question about just handling the contacts. We are going to give answers to those that contact us. So what most people think about is, of course, personal service, that you route this to an agent. But we also include all the routing rules, also to self-services, and maybe possibly even no service outside opening hours or when there is an extreme high pressure on the incoming traffic. And we like to show this picture where we have the customers at the top contacting the contact center through the different channels. And at the bottom, our organization with agents, back office staff, analysis staff, and also our bots as we have them now. That is almost a part of our staff. And what we are going to deep dive in today is the area here on the left side, the smart routing engine. That is where all the magic takes place in routing the contacts to the right destination. But just as important is the other part that you need to think about, the knowledge base or the energy, the information in the system that can be stored in something like a smart knowledge base on the right side. So first of all, what to think about, some tips and tricks and things to bring with you. First, this is almost the same picture. You have the customer at the top and the routing engine at the bottom. And our first advice is to get and collect as much information as possible, and do this early in the contact. When you get the contact, you immediately, of course, can identify the channel because you know how it's entering the system, but also you know quite a lot about the customer himself, and can gather customer data by looking up in your CRM or other legacy systems with a customer identification. We work a lot with identifications. It can be a customer number or something else, but also with bank IDs where you really can identify a person. And then, of course, identify the customer intent. What is this contact about? You can do this in a number of ways. The traditional, of course, by IVR presses, but you can also use natural language understanding in your conversation engine and get as much information as possible about what does this customer want to talk about. Because now, the more we know, the better decisions we can make in the routing engine. So when we do the design of this, so we're going to route using various methods. You're going to slice this solution. And very typically, it's a multi-dimensional problem, just like the cube on the right here. For example, customers can contact you with a number of reasons. regarding a number of products and within different customer segments. And this makes the problem quite complex, actually. And there is a risk of driving complexity in the solution by slicing either too thin or in too many dimensions. So when you do the design, keep it simple from the start and really think about what is the reason for slicing it this way. Is it really something that gives value to the customer, or is it because our organization looks this way? And I would like to place contact centers on this type of scale, the routing strategy scale. On the left side, we find organization that has a high focus on service level. They really want to reduce waiting time. And there we typically find setups with a few queues, larger queues, and generalists that can handle most of the contacts and help everyone, but not with that deep knowledge. On the right side, you have organizations that have more focus on first call resolution and want to reduce transfer rates. And typically there you see more specialists, larger number of queues, and maybe also a more fine granulated routing and more routing rules. So you can think about where you are on this scale, and maybe you're even moving. You have a strategy that you want to go to being more generalist, or to find the best answer for people on the right side. So it's all a question about actually what are your business goals?
Yes, and what we think that it's very important to continuously evaluate and rethink the routing. What are really your business drivers? As Mats just mentioned, what is most important? Is it a general service level, or do you have certain customers or services that are most important? Or maybe you focus a lot on the agent's working conditions. Many organizations work with customer journeys nowadays. But do you also think about this? Do you consider processes when you set up the routing? Or do you focus mainly on each department? We think it's important that the agents know the whole picture, so they know how to help the customer and maybe seek assistance elsewhere in the organization from their colleagues. Many customers that I meet, they have used the system for some while, and when we look into the system, we can see that it's a lot of old configuration, and sometimes nobody really knows what it's for. Why was it set up that way? So we have to look into the statistics to see if it's even used anymore. So continuously look and see if you should clean away old things in the system. And if you can you simplify? Can you make it would be easier to understand and measure and schedule. For example, we find sometimes that you set up very many skills, but then you see that many of the agents have almost all of these skills. Then it would be better to group the skills together. And also another recommendation is to have a common name standard, so it will be easier to understand for everybody and administrate changes and so on. Okay. Yes. One of the most important things with a contact center routing is that it's measurable. But of course, it's important to know what you're measuring and on what level. For example, if you look on an average, it could be that everything looks green from the outside, that your queue times on average are, for example, below 1 minute. But when you slice it, it's all red on the inside. You can find that one of your most important customer group have waiting times for example, more than 10 minutes. So it's important to decide what you want to measure. So that's one factor you should consider when you design the routing. You can, for example, have several measure points. In this system, we call them task types, but maybe you don't need as many queues or skills. Okay, so now we will show you some examples of routing and how customers have applied them.
Absolutely, and this will go quite fast, so you'd better keep up with our the speed here. We have the 6 examples actually to go through during the last 15 minutes. First of all, let's start with some basic routing rule that I think that many of you already know and have used a lot. The base routing increasing the target group, or bullseye routing, that sometimes you use that word. And that is that you expand the target group based on, for example, queue length, waiting time, opening hours, or even an overflow contract, that you add external resources when you have a high pressure on the inbound flow. And we just would like to mention some best practice rules. Always expand your search target group, but don't move around your contacts. If you are sitting and reskilling your staff, to move your staff to the queues, well, we shouldn't do that. It's better to move the contacts to agents than the other way around. And also set up this to be automatic, so you don't have to go in and do manual routing changes in the bullseye routing. Be prepared for things that can happen. And I will take an example of exactly that now. This is from an insurance company that I worked with. They typically routed incoming claims directly to the specific claims department, for example, car accidents. But when the waiting time, the estimated waiting time there got too long, they escalated that to a larger group, to a general claims agent, that is step 2. But even a step 3, if the waiting time there was too long, there was even a general customer service agent that could step in and handle this. There was immediately a 10% increase in the answer rate due to this setup. But the even bigger effect was the i-CEM warnings that you see here up in the Nordics when cars suddenly get some accidents. Because there they could handle these extreme peaks in a very efficient way compared to just a non-prepared and non-standard setup.
Yes, and another example, that's capacity routing. And what do we mean by that? Well, the routing engine acts upon all these general rules, but for chat, you also take into consideration the individual capacity of each agent and the number of contacts each agent is handling right now. You can click here to, yeah, so you see there's one that can handle 2 parallel and one that's handling 3 parallels. And there is one example here from a telecom company that really needed this functionality in order to increase their efficiency and service level to customers. And their agents handle 1 to 5 parallel chats, and the majority handles 3 chats. And then after a while, they also wanted to blend in with email. And most of the time they let the engine automatically route, push out the contacts to agents. But they also teach them how to take own control, for example, to shut down before a break or log out. All right, come to next. Yeah, and let's talk a little bit more about media blending. Well, the simplest way would be to have all your agents available for all their skills in all media at the same time. But it might not be a working environment that fits everybody. And another challenge is to blend the real-time media with deferred contacts that will not be abandoned. So a common solution is to schedule agents to handle separate media during different parts of the day. Or you have the traffic management that watch the situation and log in or out agents from queues. But instead you can now prioritize real-time media and still blend with other contacts. So you can reserve capacity for a minimum number of free agents and let the system route the contacts. So here you have an example of that. You can see up to the left you have a queue, you have one email contacting queue, and you have two available agents, the two with the green dots on. But still the email is not routed, not until you have one more agent ready to take contacts, because you have set that escalation criteria to always save 2 agents. And we have an example also of this, a customer in public sector that I worked with that use this criteria, and they actually saw that they could answer more contacts because they could handle the chats and the phone calls that didn't hang up this time. So they met and it really increased the service level for phone and chat, and the service level for email were a little bit decreased, but they still managed to handle all the emails. And the agents got some little more time. The occupancy were lower because they had some free time waiting for contacts. But most of all, it was easier for the workforce management to schedule and for real-time management. Okay, and then we have one more example of routing, and we call it personal routing. And you can take, yeah, we can see that there are actually 2 sorts of personal routing. One is more that the company chooses this, and the other one is more the customer's choice. And for the first part here, you use the contact history to see if the agent that handled the customer for a certain elapsed time period is available. Otherwise, you escalate to a common queue. And the other example is that the customer dials a certain phone number, and if that person doesn't answer, you escalate it to a common queue. And we have 2 examples of this. No, I can say this first. Yes, when is it applicable? Well, it's do your customers return frequently, and also do your agents have some free time, so they are really available for new contact. So let's look at the first example, and that is using this routing criteria latest agent, that we call it, and then they see if a customer calls back within the last 24 hours. And if so, it waits 15 seconds for the latest agent that handled the contact will answer, otherwise escalate to a common queue. And we could see that for the total calls answer for this task type, it was 5% that was handled by the latest agent. And some of the calls were then also delayed by 15 seconds. And we have another example, and that's a business-to-business customer that uses service to other businesses. And then the customer have been handed out direct numbers for the agents, and if they don't answer, they have a choice to talk to a colleague, otherwise escalate to common queue. And here we can see that it was 65% of the calls that were answered by the called agent. So now we have a final example here.
Yes, and that is for me to explain. And also this one is one of the more basic ones, but can be applicable for a number of different reasons that you maybe haven't thought about earlier. And that is, of course, to use a schedule to control and have different routing rules at different parts of the day. And this is one example where you can escalate to different queues and have a subset of your agents at some critical times that handle incoming contacts. But the standard routing is to the main queue to the right, with all agents handling the contacts. And one example of this that I've worked with is from the public sector here in Scandinavia. They have a customer service 24/7, 365 year around. And they have a time-based rule that routes contacts to a night backup group, an automatic escalation that is connected every night. Instead of having regional contact handlers, this is planned in one single place, in one part. And the result of that is, of course, very much easier to do the WFM planning and reduced staff cost, and also much simpler to handle the traffic management. But what they had to take care of was an effect at switch time, because when they switched over to the central unit, a queue from a regional unit can actually run over. So they started to handle a quite big traffic peak at the switch time. But also that could be handled by another set of contact routing rule that we placed before this one. And finally, we have even one more example of a self-learning routing. This is something we believe a lot in and we see coming in the future. And we're going to explain this by a simple example of an incoming contact that is routed based on analysis of text, context, and possibly natural language understanding, and routed to a specific queue. But when that contact is answered by the agent on the right side, he finds out, no, this wasn't about what we originally thought. So the agent updates the contact data and replaces back in the queue. And that is quite normal. This happens every day. But what we are working on is a way now to automatically convert this information, to have it as automatic feedback so the system learns to the next time, so it can make even better decisions in the future and possibly also route it to the correct queue. So to summarize some of the key takeaways that we've talked about so far, something to bring with you home and think about. Number one, when you do this design, start by defining your business drivers. What is most important? Is it service level, first call resolution, customer satisfaction generally, or other things? Number two, remember to collect as much contact data as you possibly can, not only by IVR presses, but also by looking up in other systems. Number three, keep the design simple, don't overdo things, and remember to improve, go back and take a look at regular times and let a CX consultant or someone else workshop you through the setup. And number five, learn from best practice by looking how other people are working with the routing setups. So by that, I would like to pass on to questions, if there are any